business grows as far as the clarity of the leader who builds it. Welcome to the Voice of Impact, where belief meets action. Our podcast amplifies stories, systems, and solutions behind meaningful change. I'm your host, Robert Ndoping. Today's conversation takes us into the world of leadership and entrepreneurship. Not the glamorous version, but the real one. The one where decisions carry weight, growth requires discipline, and a company's future. Because building a thriving business isn't just about strategy, it's about leadership, structure, and the willingness to think long term. My guest today is Dr. Dave Pennington, founder and CEO of Penn Coaching and Consulting. He's a seasoned leader with more than 35 years of experience managing and developing organizations. Throughout his career, Dave has served as national and international boards, built high-performing teams, and led organizations through growth, transformation, and long-term sustainability. Today, he helps small to mid-sized business owners build scalable companies that grow profits while reducing their own day-to-day workload. Through his G.A.I.N framework, Dave guides leaders in developing businesses that are achieving significant growth, often 5 to 7 times their current level, while creating a structure that allows the owner to step back from their constant operational pressure. His approach combines strategic clarity and practical execution, helping leaders analyze challenges, develop focused strategies, implement structured action plans, and measure progress in ways that leads to real results. In the heart of his work is a simple but powerful belief. A thriving company is built by a clear-minded leader who intentionally develops the people around them and prepares the business for its long-term future. Dave, welcome to the Voice of Impact today.
Well, thank you, Robert. It's good to be with you. I've looked forward to our conversation, and hopefully we'll be able to share a few insights for your listeners today.
Thank you so much. Before we go into the coaching, developing scalable companies, I'd love to start with you and your own leadership journey. What experience over the past 35 years shaped your philosophy about leadership and what brought you into what you're doing today?
Well, it might help you to know a little bit about my history. This is actually my third, I will say, career, if you want to think of it like that. I actually started in ministry. That was where I spent quite a number of years, mostly larger situations where there was lots of administrative responsibilities and oversight, sometimes as the lead pastor, sometimes as the administrative pastor. From there, I went to private education. I've been a head of school, I think, of, I don't know, 5 or 6 schools, executive director of a state group with 37 schools in it, president of a state group on a national board. And so I've done a lot in private education, adjunct prof as well. So quite a bit in private education. And then about 10 years ago, I started Penn Coaching and Consulting. For me, it was kind of a natural transition. I've kind of, in fact, even as a pastor, sometimes I would have business guys who would say, "Hey, you got time for lunch this week?" And they weren't talking to me about the church. They weren't talking to me about spiritual things. They were talking to me about some employee or some situation in their company. And, they just really wanted to have a sounding board, get some, insights, some things that maybe I could share with them. I think this has always been something I've kind of naturally, I'll say, had a gifting in, just really spotting capable people, getting them on the right bus, getting them in the right seat, and then developing them, which I think is a really critical piece. A lot of times we can get the right people, but unless you as a leader sort of lean in and really develop those people, they never really reach their full potential. And so I enjoy impacting leaders. I call it the pebble in the pond concept, which is when you throw a pebble in a pond, there's a ripple effect. Everybody who is connected to that leader is impacted by what happens in the life of that leader. And so that excites me to be able to impact leaders so then they can impact the people that are in their organizations or in their companies.
I love that pebble in the pond concept. It's just so natural, and I can imagine the pebble how it opens up and the people it impacts. I just want to ask you, I mean, you have a rich experience. I mean, very seasoned. Were there some moments that fundamentally changed how you approach leadership as a person?
Well, I think some of it, I've served under a lot of leaders, some good, some not so good, as probably all of us have experienced. In fact, I was just telling one of my sons, the other day, it's fairly rare. I hate to say this, but it's fairly rare to have an opportunity to be under a really great leader. um, frankly, even a good leader sometimes. And I was sharing with him because he was talking about work and some of the things he was experiencing in management. He's not in management, but he's experiencing some of the ups and downs of people that are above him making decisions that impact his life. And I said, as I look back upon my life and my career, I probably have learned as much what not to do sometimes as I've learned what to do. And as I was coming up kind of through the ranks, I would note, if I ever have an opportunity to be a leader, I'm not going to do it like that. I think the core for me is always been about really caring for people. Um, I hate to say this, but a lot of times, people that are in the rank and file, the employees, they don't necessarily really feel like the owner or the manager cares for them. They sort of feel like it's a win-lose. The management or the company wins and they lose. And I always tried to create what I call a win-win situation. I wanted to know about the people that work for me. I wanted to know what their aspirations were, what their were in life, and maybe even in their role or in their job or skill sets or whatever they wanted to develop. And so I made it a practice throughout my career to kind of lean in, understand the people, and try to help them accomplish their goals. And I found as I would try to help them with what they wanted, they in turn would help me with what I wanted. So it became that win-win situation. And there was a lot of loyalty that was built there, a lot of dedication that came from that because they sensed that I really cared for them as an individual. And that caused them to really want to work hard and help me in the organization that I was leading.
You really touched me there when you talked about genuine care for people. And I think it's something that is, I won't say missing, but that is, we don't have enough of it. I mean, you just hit the nail on the head there for me because it's a shame that even non-for-profits still struggle with caring for employees and managers still struggle to really show genuine care for employees, just so that, like you said, it ends up being a win-win situation. I want to ask you this. I mean, building thriving businesses. I mean, would you say it really requires a clear-minded leader from your perspective? And what could be the biggest leadership challenges that such type of direction could face?
Well, I think your clarity is so important. I'll tell you a story. I had a client a while back. It was an educational client, pretty sizable. It was a 2-year contract. I work with a team of people, and these are all high performers, like principal, superintendent kind of level people. So pretty competent, very well educated. And one of the gals on the team, she had a dual responsibility. Part of her responsibilities dealt with a team that I was working with. Part she had a separate responsibility. And I always try to over deliver. So, I was trying to help that team I was working with, but then I began to kind of get to know the people. And I said, "Hey, this other thing that you're doing, this other role that you have," I said, what's going on there? Tell me a little bit about that." And she began to describe it. And I finally said, "Well, let me ask you a question. Uh, at the end of the year, when this year is over, what do you need to have done to feel like you've been successful in that role?" And she paused for a moment and she just started laughing. She says, "Honestly, I don't know." It was a newer role and whatever. And I said, well, have you talked to your supervisor in that role? She says, I have. And you know what? She doesn't know either. And I'm like, I don't know how you can be successful with something if you don't have clarity about where you're going. It's kind of like if you're living the East Coast. I used to live in Charlotte, North Carolina. So it'd be kind of like, I talk to someone and say, hey, I'm going to take a trip to the West Coast. And I would say, well, that's interesting. And, West Coast is kind of a big place. Are you going to Washington? Are you going to Oregon, Northern California, Southern California? Which way you're going? And because West Coast is too, it's too benign, it's too uh, unclear. And so I began talking to her and I said, well, why don't you do this? Just sit down and figure out if usually it's about 3 to 5 things you need to do to be successful and really get clarity on those 3 to 5 things. And then I want you to look at, okay, under each one of those verticals, each one of those 3 to 5, there's usually about 3 to 5 things you need to do to accomplish that. So put all that together. And then I want you to go to your supervisor and share it with her and get her input and make sure that you're on target and you kind of get her blessing or her approval. So she did all that, and she went to her supervisor. Her supervisor was elated because they were figuring it out. They were trying to, and what it did for her was it helped her to know, okay, this is something I need to pay attention to. This is something that's not that important. It became a decision grid for her because she had clarity about what she was trying to accomplish. I think a lot of leaders, they're working and they're working hard, but it's kind of like they don't really know the destination of where they're going. And I know everybody wants to make money, but making money is not your only goal. I mean, you make a lot of money and still fail as a business leader. So just really getting clarity about what your objectives are, what you're trying to accomplish, and what that does, it allows you then to actually put together a plan so that you can reach the objectives that you're aiming for. But if you're not clear on the objectives, then you're just kind of working and hoping and somehow all comes together. And it usually doesn't work very well that way.
Yeah, I mean, some of the things that happen where, leaders really just struggle is, they get trapped in daily operations. I mean, what would be your advice for leaders that or owners that just get trapped in daily operations rather than that strategic thinking that, like you talked about, really having some clarity, which helps them to shift things around and grow, actually?
hmm Well, here's what I find. In fact, this is part of the process when I work with leaders. Most small to mid-sized business leaders not only are overseeing their company, but they're working in their company, at least in a role. Okay. Now, sadly, often what they do is they have multiple roles. And sometimes when I meet with them, I'll say, well, what do you really like and what are you really good at doing? Now, sometimes they know, sometimes they really don't know. Um, but so it's good I have some assessments that I use with them and I try to help them understand themselves first. And then I call it alignment. I try to align them in their companies where they are working about 80% of the time in their strengths, what they're really good at and what they really love doing. Here's what I find happens when you do that. When you work in what you enjoy doing and you're good at doing, number one, you're going to be successful because you're good at it. I mean, you just know how to do it. It's almost natural to you. The other thing it's going to do, it's going to energize you. When you're working in areas that you don't like doing or you're not necessarily good at doing, it drains or depletes you, it exhausts you. A lot of leaders are exhausted because they're trying to do too much and they're also not working in their strengths. They're working primarily in areas that they're mediocre or maybe even poor. They don't do well at all. Once I get the leader aligned in that 80% role, then I say, all right, who else do you need on your team? Sometimes I say it this way, believe it or not, there are actually people that love doing what you hate doing, and they're really good at it. You need to find those people and get them on your team. Sometimes they're already in the company, they're on the bus, but they're just not in the right seat, and you need to reallocate them. But you want to build a complementary kind of leadership team that can sort of lead, it might be marketing or sales or whatever it might be, so that everyone's kind of working in their strengths. When you do that, what happens is you're going to be much more successful. People are going to be energized. They're going to like what they're doing because they're doing what they do well. And then as an owner, and this we talked about this just a moment ago, you need to kind of lean in and say, okay, what can I do to develop those people Sometimes it's maybe get them resources, maybe getting them training, or giving them direction or whatever it might be. But the idea is you want to lean in and get them where they're working, not just what they love doing, but they have the opportunity to sort of super succeed, kind of in their zone of genius. They just really can excel in that area if you give them the opportunities and the support and the resources that are needed. When all that begins to happen, the company usually just begins to take off. But often people are misaligned. I'll tell you one quick story. I had a guy a while back. He was a friend of mine, owned a small computer service company, a half dozen employees or so. And I said, you kind of have business development or sales, and you have operations. Which one are you? He says, oh, I'm sales. No question, I'm sales. And then he says, look, I'm not trying to brag, but if I get before others, I close like 80% of everybody I talk to. And I'm like, wow, 80% close ratio. That's pretty impressive. And I said, what about the operations side? He says, no, not my thing. I hate it. I'm terrible at it. So I said, all right, be honest with me right now in your company. What amount of time, energy, and focus are you putting towards sales versus operations? To my surprise, he says, I'm 85% operations and 15% sales. And I'm like, what? Wait a minute. You kill it in sales and you hate operations and you're doing 85% operations. So I just paused and I said, well, how's that working for you? Literally, his head dropped. And he says, it's not. Right now, I hate my life. I'm not sure how much longer I can continue doing this. And, I'm just exhausted, depleted all the time. And I said, well, what would happen if we could find you someone who could do the operational, all the scheduling and the invoicing and stuff that you don't like doing, get you out of almost all of that, and then get you back into sales? What would that do for your company? He paused. He thought for a minute. He says, if I did that, he says, I would double my company in 18 months. Long story made short, he found his operational guy. He got back into sales. He got into some government contracts, and his company just took off. And it was just a matter of realigning. I think a lot of business owners are working hard, but not necessarily working smart. And what they want to do is understand themselves, align themselves where they're really strong, and then build what I call a complementary dream team around them who also are working in their strengths, and then really develop that dream team so that everything begins to take off in their company.
I really love the last one you just mentioned there, working hard but not working smart. And this leads me to really want to know, I mean, what mindset shifts do owners need, especially owners that struggle to step back from day-to-day operations in order for them to allow their company to grow sustainably?
Well, I think the big thing, it has to start with the owner. And what I mean by that is, there's a reason why owners have problems letting go. Okay. And as a coach or consultant, often I call it peeling the onion. I have to peel back the layers on the top so I can get to say, okay, look, it's obvious that you've set this thing up where you have to touch everything in your company and you're exhausting yourself in doing so. And you're becoming the ceiling of your company. Everything's kind of bumping up against you. Nothing can grow because you can't add any more to what you're already doing. But why do you feel the need to hold on to everything? Now, it's not always easy to get them to be open with you, but it comes sometimes it comes down. It can be pride. Nobody can quite do it like I can do it. I get that. You may be really good at a few things. Um, Sometimes it may be, what, I got burned once and I'm never going to get burned again. So they're protecting themselves. Sometimes it's fear. They're a little bit afraid if they let go that they'll never, maybe they won't be needed as much. They won't be, at the hub as much, and they're fearful of that. So there's different reasons, and I think as a coach or a consultant, you have to help people understand why you have problems letting go. Because if they don't understand why, they're probably not going to really let go. I often say, look, I get the idea that you're pretty good at what you're doing and you want to keep your hand on things and have on the pulse and all of that. But I want you to think about the difference between addition and multiplication. If you're doing it, or the one primarily who's doing it, it's all addition. You have one, you're adding one, you're adding one, you're adding one. But if you can develop a team of people who can help you, now you've gone from addition to multiplication. Because if you have two or three people that really help you kind of run your company, and each of them are excelling at what they're doing, they're all adding, but you take those three people, multiply them, and then you have real potential to be able to grow, and you need to realize, hey, you know what? That's a good thing, not a bad thing. And yeah, I understand you need to put metrics and reports and all those kind of things. So as an owner, you kind of understand what's happening. But there are other ways to address your anxiety about kind of being out of touch that will work for you. But the idea is you want to distribute the responsibility. You want to spread it because as you spread it, you have the potential to multiply, not just add.
Yeah, you want to distribute the responsibility. That's beautiful. So this brings me to what you developed, the GAIN framework to help business owners grow their companies strategically. What inspired you to create this framework, and what difference do you see it make with business owners?
Well, I think the inspiration just came from experience. What I kept bumping into, what I bumped into in my career as I developed in these different organizations that I worked. Um, the GAIN, the G stands for generate freedom. Most people who start a business, they want to make money, but that's not usually the primary motive for starting a business. What they want is freedom. They've been in corporate, they've been, in bad working situations, they had bad bosses, and, they just want to be able to do their own thing. But if you're not careful, if you don't structure your company right, you don't really gain that freedom. What you actually gain is a job. You build a job for yourself, and it becomes a 24/7 job because you can't get away from it because it's all on your back. And so rather than gaining the freedom you're after or generating the freedom you're after, you actually lose it. And a lot of business owners are in that role. So I try to come in, like I mentioned earlier, use some assessments, help them understand who they are, help them align themselves properly in their company. And then the A is assemble your dream team. Once you know where you should be working, there's going to be some gaps. Okay. You may be really good at sales, but you're not good at the operations. Or you may be really good at operations, but you're not really great at sales. So you need to find people who can complement you. They have strengths in areas of your weakness, and you're building a team because you want to build it where it's not just on you. Then the I is ignite growth. That comes from what I talked about earlier, which is the idea of leaning in and really developing your people. Here's what I find sometimes. A lot of people are afraid to develop their workers because they think if I develop them and really help them get good at what they do, they're going to leave me. I found it's actually the opposite because you invest in them and you care for them and you help them, they actually don't want to leave you. They like working for you. Now there may come an opportunity later that they comes along kind of can't turn this down kind of thing, and I understand that. But they actually will come to you and say, you know what, I knew this day would probably come, but I hate the fact that it's come because I have so enjoyed working for you. You have invested in me and you have developed me. In fact, this opportunity wouldn't be here if it were not for you. And I just want you to know I deeply appreciate all that you've done to invest in me. And although I'm going to make this change, I want you to know I'll do everything I can to help you find my replacement. And often what will happen is they will send you a bunch of people that are really good at what they're doing because they care about you because you cared about them. Okay. So don't be afraid to invest in people. That enables them to grow. It enables your company to grow. It becomes that win-win I talked about earlier. And then the N is navigate to scale if that's what you want to do. And I have another assessment where a business owner can take it. He can learn the value of his company. It's based upon 8 metrics. And those 8 metrics, whether you want to scale your company or whether you want to sell your company, they're the same 8 metrics that you need to address. So that N is navigate to scale if that's what you want to do, or to position yourself to sell. And I'll just give you one of them, for example. One of them is what's called hub and spoke. The idea behind that is to the degree that your company is built upon your back as the owner, you're the key person in the company, the valuation of your company goes way down and the sellability goes way down because nobody wants to buy a company that's built upon the owner because if you do that, they're concerned that when the owner goes away, then the customers are going to go away. And a lot of times in a buyout, what owners will do or buyers will do is say, look, I want to buy your company and I'll pay you this amount, but you need to stick around for 2 years. Well, the owner doesn't want to do that. He wants to be done. But the reason they're asking him to stick around is because he built it too much upon himself. And usually they're going to discount what they're willing to pay because that's not a valuable thing to them. It's a deduction, not an addition for them. So you want to be really careful about how you design it because you want to design it where one day you could sell it if you wanted to, or you could just become a private owner and get a manager in and lead and direct the manager, but you don't have to be involved in the day to day. So there's a lot of different options when you get to that end about how to get out. Pass it on to your kids, sell it to employees, finance the sale. There's a bunch of opportunities that you can look at there.
I thank you for really expanding on that model. And I just want to, just out of curiosity, what are some of the transformations that you have seen in companies that implement the GAIN model altogether?
Well, I think probably one of the ones that is impactful the most to the owner is most owners are kind of like this. I mean, and for those that are listening, they're barely their heads barely above water. Okay, and they're working 60, 70, sometimes 80 hours a week. I mean, they're just going and going and going and going and going, and you admire what they're doing, but they're exhausting themselves. They're depleting themselves. I found that if I can get the owner aligned properly within his company, doing the things that he loves doing, kind of his zone of genius, and help him build that dream team, that his personal workload can be reduced 30, sometimes even up to 50%. Now think about this. If you're an owner and you're working, 80 hours a week and you can reduce your workload to 40 hours a week or 60 hours a week and you can reduce it to 30 hours a week, that's huge. And here's what happens. Once the owner is freed up from the all the operational things that are just kind of eating his lunch on a day to day or all the things he's trying to do, what happens is he can step back a little bit and it kind of rekindles his entrepreneurial juices. He begins thinking about, if we did this, I bet we could really increase our margin here or our market here. He begins to dream again. He begins to think again. He gets new energy and he really begins to think about how he can move his company forward. And it really just kind of rekindles what he did when he first started, but he doesn't have to sustain all that or carry all that himself. And so that workload reduction for the owner in his mind, as well as his hours and physically, becomes huge for him. That's probably the biggest transformation most owners see. And frankly, they also become more profitable usually too.
Ah, that's really deep. And I just want to understand what are some common patterns that you see among very successful business owners, which is not helping them move forward?
Well, the question again was,
There's
what are
some
some
common patterns that you
oh,
see
patterns?
among
Okay, yeah.
successful business owners.
Well, I just named one of them. You're just trying to do too much. You know, look, when you start out, I get it. Okay, you kind of, let's say you have a widget company. Okay, well you're gonna design the widget, you're gonna build the widget, you're gonna pack the widget, you're gonna ship the widget, you're gonna market the widget, you're gonna invoice for the widget. You got to do a lot of things. Okay, but as your company grows, you have to grow. What started in your garage as it begins to grow, you can't continue to operate it like it's still in your garage. As a leader, you have to develop and grow, and your role needs to change. What you do and how long you spend it doing it will change through the years. And a lot of owners kind of get stuck. They don't know how to grow along with their companies. And so they just become sometimes we call it the bottleneck. I like to call it the ceiling. They're the ceiling. Everything's bumping up against them. They can't add any more business because they can't do any more. They're maxed out and they limit themselves. I think that's one of the real keys. And then often I mentioned it earlier too. They're working not only too many areas, but they're working in areas that sort of drain or deplete them rather than energize them. When you love doing something and you're really good at doing something, it almost doesn't feel like work. I mean, you're working at it and you're spending time, but it's like at the end of the day, you got energy. Hey, this is a great day, man. I killed it today. I got a lot done. But it's because it's natural for you. It's like an athlete who's in his zone, whether it's football or whatever it is, certain your body type, and there's a lot of things that go into your ability to play that particular position. And when an athlete's in his zone of genius, he plays at a superior level. Whereas if he's in a position that doesn't fit him or doesn't align for him or his body type or whatever, he could be okay, but he's never going to be really great. And so I think business owners need to really think about these things because it can really help you if you do it right, or it can hurt you if you do it wrong.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that statement there. If you love doing something and you enjoy doing something, it almost doesn't feel like work. I mean, especially if you're passionate about what you do, almost feel like leisure, feel like, I mean, becomes second nature to you. You enjoy doing it. And I mean, you do it with your best. I just love that piece of it. I want to talk another, I want to talk about another, really major piece that, major work that you do, preparing for the end game. One of those unique aspects of your work is helping owners think about the long-term future of their companies, including exit strategies. Why is it so important for owners to think about the end game early, and what are the benefits?
Well, I think it's super important. In fact, what I tell when and I don't typically work with startups, but sometimes I give advice to startups. And I will say, look, here's what I would challenge you to do. You have an idea, a concept, a product, a service, or whatever you're doing. I want you to dream out when you get your company fully built and everything's just working right for you. What's it look like? Envision that, sort of, look ahead and envision that and get clarity about where you're going. You talked about clarity earlier. And once you get clarity about that and the way it's structured, I mean, you can do organizational charts, all kinds of things you can do to kind of figure, okay, when I get there, this is what I want it to look like. Then reverse engineer back to where you are now. And what you want to do is you want to build your company with that end result in mind. Now, here's what happens with most business owners. They start a business and they don't really have clarity about where they're going. So they take a rabbit trail. And then that doesn't work. Then they come back and then go along a little bit more, then take another rabbit trail. They're kind of all over the place because they don't really have clarity about where they're going. Now, some people are going to build a business and they don't really want to sell it. Okay. Their long term plan is, hey, I'm going to build it up, get it going, and then I'm going to hire a CEO or a general manager and have him hire it, but I'm going to continue to be the private owner. Sometimes they're thinking, hey, when I get to that age and whatever, I'd really like to see one of my kids take it. That's a different plan. You know, now a lot of times with kids, they don't communicate to their kids, and then the owners are disappointed because the kids don't want it, and they've been kind of expecting that to happen. But if that's your plan, and even as you prepare your child, your son, your daughter to take over the company, there's preparation for all of that that may start years in advance before you step out. Or maybe I want to sell it. I want to sell it all right, just cash out. And, so there's a lot of different, I actually like to call it exit options. For example, I have a client right now who wants to sell his company to a couple employees. He doesn't really need the money, so he is going to finance their buyout of him. So he's going to make his price of what he wants for the company, plus he's going to make interest on what he's charging to finance it. He's going to spread his tax liabilities over a period of time so it doesn't hit him all at once. And it's going to actually set him up quite nicely for retirement when that time comes. He's going to actually take some of that money and reinvest it. And he has some ideas about some other businesses that he wants to build that are less dependent upon him being there on a day-to-day basis. So he's really thought through all of this, and you can strategize about all of that. But the idea is you want to you want to have clarity where you're going and you want to build your company. It actually helps you make a lot of decisions because if you know where you're going, when something comes along, you think, no, that doesn't fit. I'm not doing that. That's a rabbit trail for me. I'm going to stay on my path and I'm going to keep working at where I want to go. And it will just help you a lot in business where you're not meandering, taking rabbit trails, wasting time, wasting money. You're going to get there quicker, you're going to be happier, and you're ultimately going to accomplish what you set out to do. And so just thinking like that is a huge difference compared to the way most people build a business. They're not thinking long term enough. They're thinking short term.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about the rabbit trail, business owners not thinking long term, they think short term, and a lot of this. What are some mistakes that business owners make while they are preparing to sell or transition their companies?
Well, probably, I mean, one of the biggest things is waiting too long to prepare. They think, hey, I have a valuable business here. Who would want this business? They're looking at it through the seller's eyes. They're not looking at it through the buyer's eyes. When you're going to buy something, you have a different perspective. If you're selling something, excuse me, particularly something that you've developed and you kind of your blood, sweat, tears have been involved in it, it has lots of value to you because, hey, I built this thing from scratch. I mean, I've really worked hard. So it's a lot of value. Some of it's sentimental, some of it's true value, but the idea is you're looking at it differently from the guy who's coming and looking at it to buy it. And so you need to be thinking about if you want to sell your business, you want to be thinking about it. How's the buyer going to look at my business? For example, are my books in order financially? You'd be surprised. A lot of business owners. I mean, it's a rubber band and a band-aid and a piece of gum somehow all kind of put together, and they don't their books are not good at all, and they don't recognize that until they get ready to sell, and it can cost them quite a bit of money and quite a bit of time to get books in order. Okay. So you want to be thinking about how is a buyer going to look at it because you want to be prepared when that time comes where everything really looks good. He can lift the hood, he can kick the tires, and it's really everything's in order. And this is a valuable company that I'm willing to pay for. But it takes time, and it doesn't just happen because you want it to happen. You have to prepare for it to happen. That can take months, sometimes even years. Maybe a couple years, 3 years to get a business really truly ready to sell for optimum value.
Those are really some words that I think a listener must have picked up, especially business owners. And I just want to ask you, a personal question. When you reflect on the decades of experience and how you have supported entrepreneurs and businesses, I mean, what gives you hope about leadership and what keeps you motivated doing what you're doing?
Well, for me, I mean, at this point in my life, I have three objectives. Okay. One of them is freedom financially, freedom geographically, where I can live, within reason. I'm not trying to live high, really luxuriously. I can choose where I want to live. Okay. I can choose, I have adequate means to be able to do that. So that's one. One is impact. I already mentioned that one. I deeply enjoy impacting leaders because I know if I can impact leaders, that pebble in the pond concept happens and they impact all the people that are in that organization. And the third one for me is generosity. I have a desire to give to organizations. I have, at this point, I have some grandkids, and one of my goals is they're mostly young still. Um, I'd like to, when they get ready to get married and buy their first home, my goal as a grandfather is to provide a down payment for their first home that will take pressure off of them and help them be able to get into something, that is adequate for them and they could be there for a number of years. And so those are the things that sort of motivate me to want to continue to invest. And I just frankly care for people and enjoy seeing people succeed. I think we never really know. I mean, I'm old enough now. I've had people come back to me 20 years after something I said to them. I remember I had a college professor one time who said to me, "Hey, you remember that time we had that conversation in the stairwell at the university?" And I really didn't. I sort of remember seeing, you try to have an image. I remember kind of seeing him there. Well, he says, "There's something you said to me that has just completely changed my life." Now, I didn't know that. I wasn't trying to do that necessarily. I was just trying to help him. He was younger, he was at a critical time in his life, making some key decisions. But something I said shaped his life. And this was like 20 years later. He's coming back. He said, "I just want you to know I really appreciate, your guidance and your insights back then. It's made all the difference in my life." And I'm like, okay, I was really happy about that, but I didn't know I was doing that. But I think when you want to give to people and you want to help people, It's amazing, through the years, how many times I've had things like that happen where I didn't realize I was impacting people that much, but it was really at the right time, at the right place, and the right words. And it just really was a tremendous help to them. And that's very energizing to me and very fulfilling to me because I don't know that you can put a value on something like that.
Yeah, just it's just amazing when your words are really ordered and how you give something which you just give it out of your heart and how much that plays an impact in somebody else's life. It's more than a legacy that you can definitely leave, Dr. Penn. I'm just I'm just really happy that you've touched people's lives in that way, and you still keep building that. I want you to share a message. If you were to share a message with, let's say, an entrepreneur, business owner, at this point feeling overwhelmed, they want to really build something meaningful and sustainable, but they just feel overwhelmed, they feel stuck, really on clarity, and really getting that business on the ground. What would be your message for them?
This sounds a little counter inductive or intuitive, but I always tell the business owners start with you. You might say, well, that doesn't that seem selfish? No, it's really not because if you're not aligned properly in your company and doing what you're sort of designed to do, created to do, okay, then it's unlikely you're going to be able to help others. So work on yourself first. I mean, business owners typically, they invest in buildings, they invest in equipment, they invest in people, they invest in marketing, they invest in all kinds, but often they don't invest in themselves. And when you think about it, that's where you have the most potential for an ROI. Investing in yourself, making sure you're doing what you should be doing and you're doing what you love doing, and then you're building that dream team and all the other things we talked about earlier. So don't be timid about investing in you. You're kind of the key cog. You're the key person. If you're not really where you need to be, you're not going to be able to help others the way that you want to help others.
That's really deep, and thank you. Thank you so much. So, as we begin to wrap up a few things here, we have our word die. It has some themes on it on the Voice of Impact, and I will read it out just so that it makes it easier for you to choose two of the themes, and one that speaks to you and your own journey, and one for somebody listening. The words are make a difference, rebuild, overcome, stronger, peace, and patience. So I repeat again, make a difference, rebuild, overcome, stronger, peace, and patience.
Let me start with make a difference. Okay. Um, I think leaders don't really understand the critical nature of the role that they're in. Um, Now, when I say make a difference, you know, I want you to make a difference in your company. I want your company to be successful. But really, one of the key insights in your company being successful is you help the people that work for you be successful. Um, I mentioned this earlier. If you invest in them and develop them, they can do a better job. And they often, if you think about it, what do you really value when you're working in your organization? Well, I value the fact that I feel appreciated. I'm working hard. I want you to appreciate what I'm doing. I value the opportunity, the fact that you give me opportunities to grow and to develop. If that's there, then that motivates me because I want to grow, I want to develop. And when you invest in me, you're showing me that you really want me to grow and to develop. You know, and uh, and then I value the fact that you see that I my role and what I'm doing really makes it helps make a difference in the company. So I think, making a difference as a leader, I like to think it like this. As a leader, you have resources, you have authority, you have a lot of things that are kind of in your toolbox. You can use those things for yourself to kind of promote yourself and enhance yourself in a bad way, or you can use those things to develop your people I can allocate certain amounts of funds for training or development. I can make sure you have the equipment that you need. I mean, I can provide maybe bonuses or vacations or benefits or whatever. But the idea is if I'm using what I have to invest in people and really help them grow, I think I'm making a huge difference. And I think people really appreciate that and value that when you do it. So that would be one I would choose. You want me? You said a second one?
Yeah, you could choose another one just for which reflects your own journey. Yeah.
All right, read them again for me if you don't mind.
Okay, let me read them. You have the other ones that are left are rebuild, overcome, stronger, peace, and patience.
I'll take the word rebuild. You may find yourself today, as you think about it, what? I'm just maxed out. I'm exhausted. I'm depleted. I'm weary. I'm kind of just almost worn out. Okay. Now, I understand we can all get there. But if you find yourself there, what that really means is you need I call it, you need to punt. If you're familiar with football, American football, and the way it works, what happens is you're at the fourth down and you're a long way away from from the goal line. So what does the team do? Well, it punts the ball so it can reposition on the field and hopefully be able to stop the advance of their offense and be able to gain control, kind of the advantage of the field. You don't have to get out. You don't have to stop. And frankly, you don't have to just keep doing what you've been doing. You need to kind of take a timeout or you need to punt and you need to reposition or rebuild where you are. Now, sometimes that's hard to do by yourself, and I would encourage you, if you've never had a coach or a consultant to work with you, that's very helpful because as a coach, you're not emotionally involved in the business. You haven't put all the time, but you are clear-headed and objective, and you can help the owner gain that clear-headedness and that objectivity and help him reposition himself, or rebuild the organization so that now the load doesn't feel so heavy. It actually feels light and enjoyable, and you enjoy doing what you've been doing again. Maybe not quite the way you've done it before. You restructure some. So rebuild is a good word that I think can really help a lot of owners. You may need a little help doing that. If so, that's don't view that as a liability. That's an asset if you can get that kind of help.
I love when you use the analogy of football. I would prefer basketball just because I watch the NBA quite a lot. And once things are going wrong, our coaches have to call a timeout
Yep.
to be able
Call a
to
timeout.
rebuild.
And what are they doing? They're changing the momentum.
Yes.
They're maybe taking someone off, putting someone else on. I mean, there's a lot of things. They're thinking about a lot of things when they take that time out, and it can change the whole game.
Yeah.
A timeout at the right time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Dr. Dave, you talked about, people getting a coach, people getting, somebody that's not emotionally invested in them. I just want to ask you, let's say there's a business owner that's listening to this podcast and I mean, really wants to connect with you to learn more about, your game framework, your end game, all of those aspects that you've built over the years. How can they connect with you? How can they reach you?
Sure. Probably the best way. I mean, you can check my website out if you want to. It's Penn coaching.com. So you can reach out to me through there. Or frankly, if you just want to email me, it's just Dave, Dave, at Penn Coaching, Penn coaching.com. And share if you would that, hey, you heard me on Robert's podcast and you'd like to, connect with me. I'm not real pushy, I like to connect with people and I'll just be frank with you. One of the things I try to do is say, okay, is this someone that I feel like I can help? Is this someone I really want to work with? Because I function like a non-equity strategic partner. So I don't have any equity in a person's business, but I function a lot like a partner. I like to get in the ditch with you, help you navigate. I always say you got to talk to someone. You can't just talk to anyone. And let's be honest, if you're married, your spouse is tired of hearing about it because it's all you talk about. This happened and this employee and this situation or whatever. It's like, can't we talk about anything other than your company all the time? Um, but those are the kind of things that I love, just kind of taking I call it taking the journey with you, or navigating the journey with you. And so I like to come alongside, help function as a guide. But that's the way you can reach me, Dave at penncoaching.com.
Dr. Dave, thank you for reminding us that building a successful company is not simply about working harder, it's about leading smarter. For the listeners, today's conversation reminded us that the best businesses are not built by accident. They are built through clarity, discipline, and intentional development of the people and the systems. So I emphasize the people and the systems. That was Dr. Dave's advice is for anybody struggling, anybody being overwhelmed, build yourself first. So it's also the people, have that intentionality in supporting, caring for your people, and then your systems. Um, Dr. Dave, we just want to appreciate your time that you created to sit with us on the Voice of Impact. We definitely believe there's somebody that is listening today that must have gotten something. We just want to, first of all, appreciate your time for spending with us today.
Well, you're welcome, Robert. I enjoyed being with you. Appreciate your friendship.
To the person listening, your business has a potential, your leadership shapes your future, and the decisions you make today determines the legacy you leave for tomorrow. When a leader builds clarity into a business, growth becomes inevitable. We are Ndoping and Co-Performance System Designers. We help nonprofit leaders and solopreneurs create an alignment and sustainable development by turning vision into measurable output. This has been the Voice of Impact. Until next time, keep building, keep leading, and keep using. It's very simple. Empower as many people as possible. Empower as many leaders as possible. Touch as many professionals as I can. Be able to make a difference